Welcome back to the Foreign Report, your weekly foreign policy show that gives you the gory details of geopolitics with hopefully some laughs along the way. I'm your FP Zaddy, Seena Ghaznavi.
Looking sexy, FPZ.
My
Hold
shirt
on.
is so wrinkled.
How many buttons have you popped off of there?
This
here
is
the
what
last
is this?
week?
This is technically 2 buttons. I could do 3, but I don't know if the censors at YouTube will appreciate that.
No,
we're going a little
I don't know if
zaddy
our
today.
viewers. Well, our viewers appreciate it. We'll find out in the comments that you don't read.
That I don't read at all. Travis
read.
Irvine, Columbia Journalism School grad in the virtual studio. What is that? Save Crew? That's soccer.
Yeah, I'm in full sports boy mode today, Seena. My Columbus Crew, my hometown soccer team, clinched the playoffs this year. So here we go.
That's great.
And don't forget, we fought back against a billionaire who tried to move this team back in 2018. That's what his hat is referencing. Save the crew. We saved the crew. Now we're playoff bound, baby. Champs 2023.
Wow, that's great.
I
now,
know.
does the championship revolve around just everyone goes one-on-one against Messi? Is that what happens?
Eventually, yeah.
Eventually.
The whole league goes 1-1 against Messi now.
All right. Foreignreportshow.com. Sign up for our newsletter. The Foreign Report, lpn@gmail.com. Obviously, follow us on the socials. Give us a rating on podcasts, wherever you get them. Apple, Spotify. Love all the comments that I don't read. Listen. We have an interview today with Jonathan Panikoff from the Scowcroft Middle East Institute, SMESI, from the Atlantic Council. And we're going to play the full interview for subscribers to the newsletter only. Yes, our newsletter is free. Yes,
Woo!
We are giving extra content to subscribers for free. What? So sign up for the newsletter at foreignreportshow.com. You'll get the full interview. And why did we have an interview today? Why did I get up at 5:30 in the morning to talk to Jonathan Panikoff? Trump's 20-point Gaza-Israel peace plan is why.
Oof. So much context going into this. I mean, the UN was last week. Bibi Netanyahu made his speech that people walked out of. And I appreciate you getting this expert because for me especially, this is over my head. I want you and the expert to really tell us what the hell is going on here.
And it was interesting. When this came out, I read it and I was like, oh my God, I can't break all this down. There's too many things happening here.
It's a 20-point plan. I can get past 1 point for me. Frankly, this is a lot of points for Trump, too. He's a one-page guy.
Also, Netanyahu getting walking 200 countries.
I know. Was he walked more than half the crowd. What is this? One of my comedy shows? Thanks so much, folks.
Look out. No,
also,
have you ever been walked? I've walked a few people in my life.
Very, very early in my career when I was doing, and by career I mean hobby at that time. That's generous to say. So Sal's Comedy Hole, do you remember that from the New York days? It was down the street from Comedy Cellar.
Oh,
but
yes.
You barked on the corner to get time at Sal's, and you were basically getting people who couldn't afford to get into Comedy Cellar, so you drag them into Sal's. You got your stage time. We had 4 people in the audience. I had to follow 2 guys who were hilarious playing guitars. I walked all 4 of the remaining people in the audience, so all 4 people. There's only 4 people, but that meant all the other dudes that I was barking with didn't get to perform at all after me, and I felt so bad. That was very early on, and I want to just counter that with saying thanks to everyone who came to all the sold-out shows that we did here in Ohio with Trey Crowder all around the Buckeye State this past weekend. Even got some positive feedback on the Foreign Report. So
I love
Seena,
it.
The kids love you out here.
Big fan of Trey Crowder, friend of the show.
Friend of the show.
Love that, and I love the positive vibes in Columbus. Was it in Columbus?
All over Dayton, Cincinnati, Columbus, Toledo, and I am happy to say we did not walk 200 countries.
I don't even know how many countries. Can you imagine, though? Ah, God. I mean, I guess, he doesn't care. It doesn't really matter.
Undeterred. He'll be performing at the Saudi Arabian Comedy Festival later this month.
Oh, my God. The Riyadh thing. We talked about it in the newsletter from last week a little bit. I mentioned it. The Saudis are just, sandstorming us with all the sports and culture washing they're doing. They're trying to up their tourism.
Sure. Well, comedy is one way to do that, question mark. I don't know if comedy really brings in anybody. I have not been asked to perform there yet, but I am growing my beard back just in case.
Yes, it is. You have the Riyadh chic look going on for you right now.
I'm ready. Sports and culture.
Okay, so let's get to this the Gaza 20-point quote-unquote peace plan. And again, when I read this initially, I was like, okay, ceasefire, fantastic. Prisoners coming back, hostages, then there's like a release of all of these women and children that were detained since October 7th. Yeah. They were like not gone through the judicial process. So that's always struck me as strange. And then it was like this whole section on like that was like a real estate brochure of like all the economic development they're going to do. And then you got some sort of ratio of deceased Palestinians to Israelis. And I remember like Bassem Youssef was like the one on one of his Piers Morgan hits that was like, how many Palestinians to one Israeli? How many? How many? Is it 1? Is it 10? Is it 1,000? So then we got it. It's like 15 to 1, which is, strange and very dehumanizing and very uncomfortable. But I talked about it with Jonathan Panikoff as well. High level, there are 5 kind of areas that the peace plan covers. First, immediate cessation of hostilities and hostage prisoner exchanges. So within 72 hours, everything stops, no more fighting, and then we do the exchange. Great. Then there's a demilitarization of Hamas, and they called it the de-radicalization of the Gaza Strip. So that means once that agreement is made with Hamas, then basically they have to lay down their arms, de-radicalize, which is like emotional. I don't know how you do that. Right. I don't know how you figure that one out.
Sure.
And so they also get safe passage out of Gaza, or they can stay. They just have to be chill, which is like, great. I'm half a Celsius deep. I don't think I can be de-radicalized right now. Okay.
No, not after our new sponsor Celsius gets involved.
FP Zaddy is juiced. So then post-conflict, right, post the agreement, there's a governance and security thing that would happen. There's this whole temporary governing body that would take place that's going to be Palestinian run. And then, of course, there's a peace board run by Donald Trump. And then you also get the security guarantees for Israel and then also the Palestinians themselves. There's going to be a international force backed by like the Arab League, basically, that's going to be in Gaza, that's going to be helping out there. And then sovereignty and withdrawal. So the Hamas is going to be out of there. There is in the plan talk of a potential path for a Palestinian state, but what we'll talk about in the interview is that Netanyahu was like, no, absolutely not. But there is a sense that Palestinians will be able to run Gaza, but at the same time, it's like, what if there's just a blockade again? What does that even mean? And then there's also humanitarian aid, reconstruction, and future political horizons. So I think the humanitarian aid, we go into that as well. The UN would be coming back, and then there would be all this economic development. So we cover all of those points, and we could do that very slowly on this show, just between you and me, Travis. But I thought it would be nice to have an expert ruin everyone's week as opposed to just you and I.
Great.
We recorded this morning with Jonathan Panikoff. It was great to have him on the show, and we'll come back and I'll give you a little bit of my take on afterwards because I do have some reflections on it. Again, as always, be an adult. Hold these conflicting truths in your body and your mind and your heart. This is not easy. I'm trying to understand everything. There are things that I don't know. There are things that you don't know. I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I am trying to learn as much as I can. I have my thoughts and feelings, but I also have my knowledge that I'm constantly trying to grow. That's enough of my little preamble. Okay? This is it. All right, let's go to the interview. Jonathan Panikoff is the director of the Scowcroft Middle East Security Initiative and a former deputy national intelligence officer. That's a long title, Jonathan. I have to say it every time you're on the show. Welcome back to the Foreign Report.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Look, you can just use SMESI, which nobody knows what the acronym means, but it'll be shorter, and that's
Smessy.
fine.
Ooh, that kind of fits very nicely. The director of Smessy. That's great. I'm going to use
Exactly.
that from now on.
Please do. Yeah.
Thanks so much for being on the show. What talk about a mess and a smessy. Well, this is I want to talk about Trump's 20-point Gaza-Israel peace plan that he put together. It's on my first read of it, I thought, wow, is Trump going to win the Nobel Peace Prize? And then I read more and I started being critical of it, and I was like, okay, there's a lot of holes in this thing. And then of course I heard what Netanyahu said afterwards. So basically, I'd like to go through that peace plan and then also go through kind of Netanyahu's response, and then we can kind of talk about it at that way. Does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess the one point from the beginning that I want to just bring up is that there's, if Hamas agrees, and let's just presume that Hamas is going to agree to this hilarious 20-point real estate brochure, there's an agreed upon line that the IDF would go back to, that all the hostages, prisoners alive and dead, or they would be returned. What is the agreed upon line, and how was it agreed upon?
Well, I think two things. One, it wasn't agreed upon yet, right? So it's systematic. So there seems to be some indication that the line changed from what was this idea originally when it was a 21-point plan before Prime Minister Netanyahu was in Washington this week, to what became a 20-point plan and what the line would be. So it's actually, if you look, it moves out starting from the coast toward Israel about where the troops would go and the iterative process and under timelines of which they would go. I think that transition was always going to have to be slower. To be totally fair, there was no way the Israelis were ever going to accept everybody leaves in 72 hours at once.
The other thing that I'm curious about it, and I want to ask in this context, there was this the for every Israeli remains, they will give 15 Gazans. And despite the very strange dehumanizing aspects of ratioing human life to human life here, is there a historical context for this as being part of a negotiation for a political settlement in a war?
Yeah, so this has actually happened with the Israelis and Hamas before, frankly, in some of the other conflicts. So you're right. It is a strange, almost through the looking glass situation to be trying to calculate what a human, somebody alive is worth, what somebody dead is worth. The most interesting thing is that ratio has changed, right? That ratio from the early negotiations to what it is today is actually lower. And so I think there's this question, will Hamas come back and say, no, 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 that ratio is insufficient for us to negotiate. We want to go back to older ones. I think there's going to be a real challenge here. You may be able to negotiate on a ratio, and me too. I'm sorry for having to put it in such a frankly dehumanizing context. Just the reality of what's written in the points.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's a negotiating point, maybe. Whether some of the others, though, I think are going to be harder to change. And so that's where we're going to get to this really interesting question on the 20 points as a whole. If Hamas doesn't accept it as a fait accompli, which I would be surprised if they did, even with Arab pressure, and comes back and wants to see changes, is there an openness for changes into negotiations, or does that give Netanyahu just simply, in his mind, the ability to walk away and say, nope, completely done, we're going to further extend the Gaza City campaign?
It does seem like he's always itching for an excuse to not end this thing. I don't know. I'm just a foreign policy curious guy here.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's not, look, I think over the last few years, that's certainly, it's evolved, right? I think at the beginning, there was no expectation Israel was going to end this war one weekend. And anybody that thought that it just wasn't going to happen, I'm sorry. There is, I think, a real opportunity that even if Ben Gvir and Smotrich and some of the other ultra nationalists left the government and pulled it down, you would see folks like former Defense Minister Gantz come back in and say, okay, we're gonna stabilize the government. Some of the parties that are more centrist will come in solely to get to a resolution, solely to get to the end of the war, because most on the center right, center left, even actually do want this war to end, and Israelis overwhelmingly want the war to end. So the politics are a little better here. But it's really going to be about, I think, Hamas's response, and we're going to see that in the coming days.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I've talked about on the show and one of the things I've been reading is that there's always talk from Netanyahu about a military resolution, but never until this 20-point, 21-point plan was there a political solution. Frankly, Netanyahu bombed the political solution in Qatar. And so he was, this is the whole problem that I have, is that you can end it saying, if you just bring the hostages home, this whole thing will be over. Sure, great, buddy. That's a military solution that you're talking about. But the political solution that I'm hearing from you right now is that, hey, the domestic politics in Israel have changed, and that's why we're at a potential political solution?
I think potential, obviously being the key word. I think what I'd say is it's open space, more space than existed before. I think your point here is really important in terms of how Netanyahu sees this, because I think it's a mistake to look, and I know it's frankly painful, but it's for a lot of folks, understandably, given the humanitarian crisis that exists in Gaza, but it's a mistake to look at Gaza in isolation if you're trying to understand the Israeli perspective here. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu looks around the region and says, I have made Israel singularly safer because military action that I've taken works. And so why would I not keep doing that? And the problem is, well, once you start doing that, you have to keep doing that, right? It's why there's still concern about, will Israel strike in Iran again at some point? It's why there's still concern about Israel strikes in Syria and trying to get to some sort of security arrangement. The same thing is true here. From his perspective, military action has diminished the threat. The long-term strategic challenges associated with that, I think there has not been a lot of real thought given to them. And that's the issue that a lot of folks like me say, you're creating a strategic situation that's different. I actually believe, I'll be honest with you and your listeners, I actually was okay with how Israel struck Hezbollah. I thought it actually has diminished the threat, and I think it's opened up a space. Even among the Arab capitals, you hear this. That's actually really positive. And in Lebanon, if the country can take advantage of this to not be held hostage by the group. I think that opened up space in Syria, and the Iran threat, you and I talked about last time. I won't go back through it. But look, you can make an argument. I think the challenge is there were still strategic objectives. In Gaza, there hasn't been, and there haven't been for months. And so that's why so many people are saying, okay, this is just political at this point.
Yeah, there's this thing, though, about the safety. If I'm an Israeli and I hear Netanyahu said, I've diminished the threats from abroad, I've made you safer, I would just think that, yes, if I punched a bully in the face on the playground and I was like, guys, I got it, that bully could just wait till his nose gets better and then come back the next week and punch me again, and maybe he's bringing his friends with me, or maybe he's going to attack me from a different way. I just don't buy this safety thing because it's so short-lived, and the violence and that he's created, and frankly, and I wanted to ask about one of the points in this is about making Gaza a de-radicalized, terror-free zone. Oh boy, is it going to be like Columbia University terror-free zone, de-radicalized? What kind of level of de-radicalization are we talking about? Because for me, I think all of this is a cycle, and it's only going to beget more violence. If I'm a kid that's been illegally detained, what law is really applicable at this point, really? Why wouldn't I be radicalized? Why wouldn't I try to rise up against someone that's just held me in prison for 2 years with my mom?
Yeah, I think the Israelis will tell you that there's obviously huge debate on this. The challenge here is, I think, getting to a broader strategic question that is exactly where you're getting frustration from so many of the surrounding Arab countries in the region. Yeah. Because I think their point is, for a lot of years, Iran was viewed as the biggest threat in the region. And now what you hear in capitals, and it's not just publicly, I'm hearing it privately, the view is that the greatest destabilizing force in the region are the Israelis, right? The problem is they are, to use your analogy, the biggest bully on the playground. They're the most capable, they're the most efficient, they're the most advanced technologically. But to what end? In other words, the reason you're getting much of the Arab states saying there has to be a political horizon vis-a-vis the Palestinians is exactly to say, if you don't have a political horizon, then we're locked into cycle after cycle of violence that, yes, Israel will be okay for a year or year and a half or maybe 6 months, but then there's going to be another cycle of violence. And that's going to be bad for the region as a whole and bad for the entirety of the Arab Gulf, as opposed to if we can get to some sort of political horizon. And by the way, a lot of them, what you're hearing now behind the scenes is political horizon doesn't even have to be a two-state solution. But a political horizon, it can be a long horizon, has to be something that actually gets to how do you answer the question of the future of the Palestinian people. And what we've seen for a lot of years is Israel's government ignoring that question, just fundamentally making the decision that they were going to ignore it, that the Palestinians were over there, and then if there's a problem, we'll beat them back with military force. Now, all of us hope that cycle is broken eventually. But I think the reality is you're going to need new leadership to break it, probably new leadership both in Israel and on the Palestinian side.
You mentioned the humanitarian assistance that's coming in. One of the things I wanted to ask about is in the plan, they talk about distribution will be handled by the UN agencies and the Red Crescent without interference from either side. I guess my question for you is, does this mean that aid will then go to more places other than those 4 terribly run Costcos that they keep talking about?
Yeah. I like that description, terribly run Costcos. The answer is yes, in theory, right? Because in theory, there's also more places for the Palestinians to be able to spread out. There's more places for them to be able to move. There's more opportunities for them to be able to go. And so you'll need to have more distribution sites. You'll need to have more access. The irony here is, I think, you're talking about the UN and the Red Crescent doing the distributions. And so I think you're getting quite a few people going, well, then why did we stop the UN and the Red Crescent doing the distributions to begin with and going to GHF? I don't have any insights or answers to this. I think my answers are probably along the lines of everybody else's, which is, that's not how I would have done this. I don't think it's made a particularly lot of sense and has not been particularly helpful. Again, I'm going to be a realist here. We are where we are. And so in theory, yes, you're talking about agencies who do this professionally, who know how to do this, who should be able to help advance this. I'm cautiously optimistic that it would lead to significantly more distribution, but I think you'd also have better distribution because you're going to have more aid coming in.
If humanitarian aid's coming in, this also leads to an economic development plan that Trump talked about in the 20 points. Is that this seems like Gaza 2.0? Is this the Riviera stuff? Because this is where it turns into like a Trump brochure.
Yeah. I mean, I think President Trump might like it if it was the Riviera stuff. I don't think it is completely. I mean, the big difference between now and February is that President Trump's very explicit in this plan that no Gazans will have to leave other than those who might want to. And so that's actually a pretty big difference in terms of construction and building. I think, look, you do need huge foreign investment and huge economic capabilities to be built. I think kind of 2 things are challenging here. One is the question of who is actually going to reconstruct Gaza is really problematic, because I think the expectation from the U.S. and a lot of Europeans is, okay, there'll be a donor conference, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be the Gulfies. I got to be honest, I've spoken pretty at length to folks in Riyadh, in Abu Dhabi, in Doha. There's a real concern and frustration there because their view is, we're expected to reconstruct Lebanon, we're expected to reconstruct Syria, we're expected to pay for reconstruction in Gaza, and we're expected eventually to do it in Yemen as well. Believe it or not, as wealthy as some of the Gulf states are, they're not that wealthy. There's not close to that much financial support to be able to do that. The second point of this is, okay, there's talk in the 20-point plan about heavy equipment being able to move in to remove the rubble. The best humanitarian experts I speak to tell me that we are now at least 2 years away from reconstruction even being able to begin. That it's going to take at least 2 years to just stabilize the humanitarian situation, to remove the rubble, to actually get to a place that you can do this. So I appreciate the goal of President Trump's economic development, but this is not a near-term thing. And all of the political and security pressures and the threats that exist in the meantime are still going to exist during this period of transition.
This is a quote from the Washington Post article from Gael Talshir, a political scientist at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. She's talking about Netanyahu's response to this, and as what she's saying is there's a lot of gray area in the deal, and this is how Netanyahu wanted it. He can tell the right wing he will never, quote, fully withdraw, and he can show Hamas is the one saying no, and he can continue the war. What is your reaction to that?
I think that's probably pretty accurate. I think Netanyahu has always been, whatever you think of his policies, whatever you think of him as a leader, he is an incredibly gifted politician. We've seen this. The rumors of his demise for years have been
a decade plus,
not just exaggerated, wrong every time, more. Yeah, I mean, I remember people back, remember, he was prime minister from 1996 to 1999. I remember people saying, well, that's the end of Netanyahu. He'll never be back. I think the challenge here is, while I agree that the statement is accurate, I think he wanted it gray. I think he wants to be able to put it on Hamas. Two things can be true at once. I think he wanted it this way to be able to say that to the right wing and to be able to say, this is my minimum requirements, and if Hamas doesn't meet it, this is on them. But the other thing that I think is also true is that if Hamas doesn't agree, they also have partial responsibility. Two sides have to fight this war. And I've not been, and I'm going to probably upset most of your young listeners, I am not among those who thinks that if Israel just stopped immediately, it would end things. I don't think that, because I think the history, unfortunately, has been, no, you'll see another terrorism attack. This will be spun as a victory for Hamas no matter what, but it's going to be another terrorist attack, and you're leaving Hamas in power in Gaza, and that's actually really bad for the Gazan people. The flip side is, does Israel have to conduct a war like this? Could they have gotten to a negotiation? Could they have gotten to a resolution months ago? Absolutely, right? I'm firm on this. There is no strategic military objective, and so there's no reason to be doing this. I had somebody say to me recently, and it was a really interesting point, an Israeli expert, who said to me, the problem in the conduct of this war from Netanyahu is that he didn't prioritize the hostages enough to minimize the military strategy, and he didn't prioritize a military victory enough to give up on the hostages. And it's a really, I've been really thinking about that, because I think I mostly agree with it. And it's a very cynical and very realpolitik way to look at it. It's very cold, and I want to be clear about that. But from his perspective, this is kind of typical Netanyahu. The decision to want everything gray throughout so that he has wiggle room and to not commit, I think, has not only prolonged the war either way, it has also made it so that there is just tactical victory with no longer-term strategic foresight, increasing the likelihood we just continue these types of cycles of violence. That's what he's trying to end. I'm hoping an international force will be able to help end that in the long term, or revitalize Gaza, or revitalize PA. But it's a huge challenge. And I think the idea that Netanyahu, singularly is responsible for this, I think is probably becoming more and more true. If you look at how disagreeable the military establishment, security establishment, diplomatic establishment has been from the plan that we currently see, you've never seen a split this big between kind of the traditional security establishment and the political establishment. And I think Netanyahu's legacy is going to largely today be predicated on the long-term implications of this war.
I want to end with this question, and thank you so much for your time. There's mention of a two-state and Palestinian statehood in the point plan. And then Netanyahu's response is absolutely not. That'll never happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is, he's like, it's not written in the agreement either. We are firmly opposed to a Palestinian state. I know you just talked about, if Israel stopped the war, there would be another terrorist attack. But what about the option of, they want to de-radicalize the Gaza Strip, but wouldn't the way to de-radicalize the Gaza Strip is to reverse the thing that radicalized them in the first place, is the occupation, and to give them a path to statehood? Again, I'm just a guy in LA that's foreign policy curious, but I may not have all the solutions. It does seem like the logical one, though.
Yeah, I think it's really important to go back a little, because from the Israeli perspective, their view is they did this, right? Their view, and what's tough here is this is across the ideological spectrum. Even those on the left, even some of the far left will say this to you. Their view was in 2005, they disengaged. Ariel Sharon withdrew all troops from Israel. He withdrew completely. Then there were elections because President Bush decided that the very first thing we should do is have elections. And I think hopefully we've learned the lesson that you actually need civil society structures in place first. I don't know that we have learned that lesson, but hopefully. And there were elections and Hamas won the elections. And then, right, you have this fight with Hamas and the Palestinians and the PA withdrawals. And so then you've got Hamas in charge of the Gaza Strip for a long time. And Netanyahu has culpability here, right? And more recently, there was money being transferred from Qatar to Hamas because his goal is he wants to keep everything calm and give just enough sustenance for the Palestinians. October 7th was an absolutely horrific terrorist attack for which there is literally no excuse. I am in the camp that I think is going to be a minority, especially of your listeners, that fundamentally believes, having spent a long time studying Hamas and engaging with Hamas, that the problem in the Gaza Strip with Hamas is that Hamas's goal, October 7th, I think was what we call catastrophic success. I don't think they expected it to be that big. I don't think they expected it to be this much death. I don't think they expected this level of Israeli reaction. But I do believe that Hamas's fundamental goal is to not have Israel next door to it. That it fundamentally does not want Israel. It wants the destruction. And so you'll see terrorist attack after terrorist attack after terrorist attack. That is different than I think a lot of the Palestinian people and a lot of the Gazan people, who I think really do just want peace and security and their own prosperity and their own opportunity to live without threats coming from that. The de-radicalization, I think, can be helpful, but that's a long process. And so I think the bigger question is, okay, in the interim, if that's a 10, 15, 20-year process, are you going to give, to your point, the space for that process to play out? Or are you simply going to go back in and take care of, quote unquote, another, I should say, take care, quote unquote, of when another attack happens? Because if that happens, then it undermines the process and you're starting from square one again. One of the things that people like me who support an international force think is positive is by having it will make it harder over the long term for the Israelis to just keep rushing back in, at least into the areas that they haven't already disengaged from. And so the timeline of that disengagement, I think, is actually more important than anything else. I think it will be hard. Hamas is really struggling. It's going to take a while for them to be able to respond and to rebuild, if they even try to. They've long relied on Iranian support. The Iranians are not in a great position to help them rebuild in the same way. You do have an opportunity here. Out of the horrific violence, the horrific humanitarian situation, the horrificness of Israelis being held hostage for almost 2 years now, there is a pathway, and a positive pathway, to make this a positive result long term, that this won't have all been in vain. The challenge a number of folks like myself have right now is that history just isn't on our side. What history tells us is the cycles will repeat. There's a really bad job, and it happens with a lot of academics, it happens with strategists and professionals. The Middle East, for some reason, everybody defaults to these kind of three lines that either things will get better things will get worse or we'll muddle through, and we're just going to muddle through again until the next thing. But the Middle East is a region that traditionally doesn't. There's actually a lot of surprises. And if you told me 2 years ago where we were versus then, if you told me a year ago where we'd be in the region as a whole versus where we are today, I think there would have been a lot of folks really, really surprised at that. And so there can be an opportunity for this to end positively, 10 years that we'll look back. But everybody has to commit to it, and you're probably going to need leadership change across the Israeli spectrum, the Palestinian spectrum, and a real desire by the civil societies in both countries to be even more formidable, take up the role, and to do the hard work. And I just don't know that we're there, even as folks like myself will keep pushing for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful for your perspective, because I think I try to express to our audience as well that I want us to be adults and hold these very difficult things together, these ideas that conflict with each other in our brains at the same time, and hold our hearts as well. And I think it's extraordinarily difficult, especially for people that are just doom scrolling on their devices. And I think there's a lot of nuance here that we have to navigate. And yeah, I mean, I see it in some cases differently, but I'm also really grateful to be able to learn from you and understand these things a little bit better. And I think our audience will too. So Jonathan Panikoff, director of SMESI and a former deputy national intelligence officer, thank you so much for being on the show. Okay, that was a great interview. Thank you, Jonathan Panikoff from the Atlantic Council, for being on the show. I guess just to reflect on that very quickly, Travis, what I experienced during it was difficult for me because I disagree with some of the things that he was saying, or some of the thoughts that he has. I in general disagree with the occupation, and I think apartheid is wrong, as Amnesty International has pointed out is what's happening there. And I also understand that no matter what I feel or what I see happening or what any organization says is happening, that there is a real geopolitical reality that we all have to be in. And he mentions it in the interview as the realpolitik. There is a reality here. There are power players involved. There are people that are making moves, and we have to understand why they're doing these things, because Palestinian lives are in the balance. Israeli lives are also in the balance. These people, there are innocent people that are getting slaughtered all the time here. And there's just a cycle of violence that I see that keeps happening. And, there's a part of me that does feel, hey, if you want to de-radicalize the Gaza Strip, maybe reverse the thing that radicalized them in the first place, right?
Right.
And so if you kidnap a bunch of women and children that, for the vast majority were not criminals, you can't be surprised if some of those young people or some of those people are going to come back radicalized, or they're going to come back not really happy about being detained for 2 years. So listen, I want peace. I'm on the side of peace. But I'm also learning about the realities here as well. So that is what I feel. You'll sound off in the comments. I want you all to absorb everything. Again, sign up for the newsletter at foreignreportshow.com. We're going to put out the full interview there free for subscribers. So foreignreportshow.com. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about this Argentinian bailout and also a big deportation of my fellow Iranians from the United States.
Oh, boy. Do they all
dear.
have their buttons unbuttoned the way you do, sir?
Yeah. I don't know. Buddy. Maybe. All right. For Travis Irvine, I'm Seena Ghaznavi. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the Foreign Report. I'm Seena Ghaznavi, FP Zaddy. T-Seps is in the virtual studio, repping the crew. So good to see you.
Save the crew, baby. Playoff bound. Let's go.
I'll tell you who's playoff bound as well. Argentina. Because
Historically very good at soccer, but
very good at soccer.
This conversation, I feel, is headed in a different direction.
Well, some of you may have seen the image of Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reading a message from the Agriculture Secretary, quote, expressing concern about Trump's proposed $20 billion bailout of Argentina. Well, what could we spend $20 billion on? No, not healthcare.
No.
Not housing.
No. We got to tighten the belt. Didn't we learn any lessons from the big, beautiful bill?
Well, happy
more
government shutdown. Exactly.
Yes, absolutely. As of this recording, October 1st, we are in a shutdown.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Here's some context for it, though. Underpinning everything here is that China has significantly cut back on purchasing U.S. agriculture since the new tariffs went into effect. This is something I've been looking at a lot, of these soybean farmers being very upset about the tariffs. And China was buying all the soybeans from America. It's really important because China has not bought any U.S.-grown soybeans, whereas before, they used to buy 25%.
Yes. Oh, it's absolutely huge. I've also been reading about it a whole ton, not just because my native state of Ohio, soybeans is one of our major cash crops here, but it's also red states like Tennessee, which grows like 30% of their agriculture is soybeans as well. So all these soybean farmers have been dealing with inflation, meaning it's more expensive to grow said soybeans, right? The equipment, the fertilizer, everything like that, inflation from tariffs from Canada as well. And then there's also weather. At least here in Ohio, they planted all their soybeans, and we got a ton of rain, 14 inches to be exact, flooded out the crops. They had to plant again, and then we had 3 or 4 months of drought. So soybean farmers are absolutely getting hammered right now. And then the soybeans that do grow, which now they're only worth like $10 a bushel as opposed to the usual $20+ per bushel. Now there's no one to buy them, because China's not buying them, and they are buying them from, and I believe you're going to get to it, Brazil and Argentina.
So basically, right, Argentina's economy is in free fall, and Trump wants to help his chainsaw buddy, Javier Milei. And the catch is that immediately after this announcement, Argentina cuts its own tariff on soybeans, and China jumps all over it. They purchase enough to completely eliminate their need for U.S. soybeans. Understandably, U.S. farmers relied on that Chinese market, are very upset. Trump has also floated the idea of sending payments to struggling farmers, but that does not solve the underlying problem, losing the entire Chinese market.
Right, and you recall this is what he did in his first administration.
Yeah.
This is the tariffs caused the same exact problems, and the farmers experienced the same exact problems in Trump administration number 1, and yet they voted for him again overwhelmingly, knowing that this policy could take place.
So we have a clip from one of these soybean farmers talking about the impact of the tariffs and the loss of the Chinese market here.
The American farmer, especially myself included, is we don't want aid payments. We want to work. We work the land, we harvest the land, the crop off the land, and the worst thing that we could ever want is a handout.
We want to deliver the message to President Trump and his leadership team that we need trade. He's mentioned many times that he loves farmers. Right now, we need to see swift action, or we're going to lose a lot of these farmers that the president loves.
There you go. That's serious stuff. I mean, this is absolutely serious stuff.
This is deadly serious stuff. And by the way, I don't know if for the YouTube people, you probably saw this, but for the audio listeners, there's all this infrastructure that these farmers have to get. And
yes.
If you know, I don't know a ton about farming, but what I do know is that they have to finance all of this equipment, and they basically get a huge loan to get it. So they need these huge swaths of sales of their farms, of the crops that they grow, to come through, or else they're saddled with so much debt. I mean, talk about a risky business. It is very risky unless the government is providing that trade. That's why it's a great business if you are able to have the backing of the federal government, or at least the support of the federal government that's going to provide trade. A payment to keep your house and to pay your mortgage sounds nice, but it's not going to last forever, and it's not going to ensure that you can keep your farm eventually because the bank's not going to care.
Right.
The bank still wants its nut. So you gotta sell these soybeans.
Right.
So thanks.
The bean money ends up being your nut, which is, I don't know if a bean is a nut, but that's a question for our farmer.
Wow. I love this question. What is a bean is a legume.
Okay, there you go. Well, the bank needs to get their legumes too, all right, because they're very healthy and they're very good for you. But, we come from the video production world, so I am in the same boat. I've been reading all about these farmers, and a lot of the visuals we saw there, it's exactly what I was seeing when I was driving around Ohio with Trey Crowder, and it's these very empty-looking fields. A lot of the crops are very yellow at this point because of all the drought we've been experiencing. And so, again, like you pointed out, these farmers are now faced with losing their farms entirely. Because you're right. We come from video production. When we produce a project, we need to have that money up front to produce the actual product, to make the video, to make the movie. And then eventually you make that money back. You pay back your investors. And farming is the same way in that you're usually taking your profits from the year before, the crop from the year before, to pay for the fertilizer, pay for all the machines that you just saw. And that's how the cycle continues. But you're absolutely right. If you have a bad year, one bad year for especially a family farm or smaller farms, that can set you back. And then you got to start selling off land, taking out, your mortgages. I mean, your home could basically go up as a potential collateral to get some of these loans. So it's absolutely devastating. And what we're doing now is throwing $20 billion towards our Argentinian competitors for these soybeans.
Well, what's funny is that we just got totally outmaneuvered. Oh, the 3D chess that Trump likes to do. No 3D chess, not even checkers here. You gave the guy money to bail him out, and then he got propped up by China at the same time. He's having his cake, he's eating it too, he's rubbing the icing all over his face, and a model is licking it off. Okay? That's what's happening.
And keep in mind, this guy is a quote-unquote libertarian hero. He's a narco-capitalist of some sort running Argentina, chainsawing all of their government spending, and he's putting their economy into free fall. So who's there to bail him out? Trump and the American taxpayer.
All right, let's move on to something a little bit lighter, Travis.
Okay, fair enough.
100 Iranians were deported back to Iran.
Doesn't sound lighter at all. Those are your people. Hold on. Let's see. Are they good Iranians? Are they bad Iranians? Because you're a good one.
I'm sorry I'm laughing. I'm not sorry. This is the only thing I could do other than scream.
Right.
This is the worst thing, and I guarantee you quite a few of these are going to be, Trump supporters. But despite objections from human rights activists and lawyers, the Trump administration, in coordination with the Islamic Republic regime, deported over 100 U.S.-based Iranians back to Iran. The New York Times reports that distraught Iranians were calling a UN hotline for refugee assistance before being deported back to Iran. The administration announced that it plans to deport 400 plus Iranians. Here's a quote. 2 Iranian officials said the deportees included men and women, some of them couples. Some had volunteered after being in detention for months, and some had not, they said. The officials said that in nearly in every case, asylum requests had been denied or the people had not yet had an asylum hearing. So this is also happening in context with over 4,000 executions that are also happening in the Islamic Republic of Iran after the 12-day war. You see, the Islamic Republic got so paranoid about everything that happened, about Mossad infiltrating their ranks, that they then, did they do a surgical investigation? No, they just started killing everybody that even had a whiff of anti-government sentiment. And this is a common practice from the Islamic Republic, is that they go and they do huge policing after something like this, after, an engagement that doesn't go their way. And I don't know what's going to happen to these people. I mean, I can only imagine what's going to happen. I mean, I especially the ones that were seeking asylum, they could just be imprisoned. Right. I don't know if they're going to be welcomed back with open arms. Who knows? It's really difficult to say, but I don't think it's good. I know. There's a reason they risked their lives to come to America in the first place. Honestly,
Zaddy, stay with us.
Okay.
Stay with us, Zaddy.
Sorry.
No, but my question to you is, just because you've educated all of us so much on the situation over there, is this yet another indirect consequence of Bibi Netanyahu and his Project Rising Lion, where he was trying, I remember you saying that he was trying to inspire Iranians themselves to basically go against their own government, but now that he's kind of stepped back and the 12-day war is over and everything, per what you just said, are these people who may have been even thinking about being part of Project Rising Lion, they're the ones who are literally on the chopping block?
Yeah, it's first, yes, and second, I think the negotiation that has been done probably through the Qataris is something that has to do with it. Again, this is the cynical and depraved administration using real people as negotiating pawns, and it's really frustrating. These are people like my family, basically, that came here in '82.
Right.
They could
political refugees, if you will.
Yeah, and so who knows? I mean, my parents came here through relatives that were here already, but I don't know, man. Sometimes I don't know what to say. Sometimes when we live in a country that espouses so much freedom and opportunity, but we decide that it's only for a few. And even for the people that are here, we treat them like shit.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. All right. Sorry. I was trying to find the light in there, but there isn't. And it's awful. Hopefully it made it a little bit bearable because the news is terrible. Jason. Well, let me hit this. FBZ, he needs a little bit more Celsius juice.
Take off another button. Let's see what happens.
Oh, my God. Hey, ICE may show up if I take off another button. They're like, we found you.
We found him.
From our satellite imagery, we found a furnace, heat spot here in Los Angeles. Okay. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we will have really what's become my favorite part of the show, the JD Vance Corner. This is the Foreign Report. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Foreign Report. Sorry, I got a little emotional on that last segment there.
You're allowed.
You're allowed. Woo! FB Zaddy got emotional. T-Seps. It's time for the best segment of the show. JD Vance.
Give him a chance. No, wait, he sucks. Man, does he suck. I understand sometimes we try to keep this segment fun, like, oh, he sent JD Vance to Greenland or something like that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, every week this gets more ominous.
It does, huh?
And yeah, we're just going to have to keep that going. But again, the only bright side is that I think a lot of people, the reason we do this now is so we are documenting what I believe will be the eventual downfall of the supposed MAGA movement successor, JD Vance. And this is how we're going to do it, week by week. Yeah. All right. So we're jumping in. Do you remember, Seena, simpler times a couple weeks ago when Charlie Kirk was murdered and JD Vance filled in on his show and there was a 13-minute clip, but we didn't play it. We only played like a part of a 1.5-minute clip.
Right.
JD Vance? Well, the repercussions of what JD Vance called for, if you recall what he called for, is that we need to start getting people who speak ill of Charlie Kirk fired, right? That's what he said.
Yes, a war.
A war on free speech, despite the fact that Charlie Kirk believed in free speech. That's right. Well, it's happening. And unfortunately, dozens and dozens of people across the country who work in academia or for government are now becoming shall we say, casualties of this war on free speech. I'm going to give you an example out of Indiana. A university administrator named Susan Swerk. She's shared two thoughts on her private Facebook page. And you recall, seeing what we said in our YouTube-only commentary on the Charlie Kirk killing. We did remind everyone that what you put on the internet is forever, and it's not private. even if you think it's private.
Yeah.
So that I'm just going to take that as our.
By the way, incognito mode also not private.
Which goes, it's outcognito. That's not.
It does make sure your mother
cognito.
can't see your search history, though.
Well, that's good. So here's what she said on her private Facebook page: is that the killing of right-wing activists was wrong, but his death reflected the violence, fear, and hatred that he sowed. You recall a lot of other people have said similar things, right? That if he had preached unity and peace, blah, 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 maybe, people wouldn't be so angry at him, so on and so forth. So a lot of people put out there that him being killed was wrong, but he kind of reaped what he sowed. Well, this private Facebook post upended her life. The Indiana Republican Attorney General soon obtained a screenshot of what she posted, and because she's an administrator at Ball State University, he added it to an official state website that names and shames educators for their comments on Kirk.
Oh, my God.
Sure enough, Libs of TikTok, a huge social media account that's against liberals, mocking liberals on X. It has 4.4 million followers. Her post got reposted there, and then the university was forced to fire her due to outcry of students and nationwide conservatives alike. So right away, she is a casualty of quote-unquote posting something private on Facebook, and obviously someone in her little private world screenshotted it and got it out there.
So let me get this
got
straight.
Her fired. Yes.
A government entity took speech from an employee. Oh, because it's Ball State University is a state-run school.
Yes, state-run school, and the Attorney General is limited in what he can do legally, but he can do what he's doing.
So he didn't necessarily say, "Hey, you can't say this."
Right.
But what he did do is he used the immense platform that he has.
Yes.
And posted it on a public website to name and shame, and then that person was fired.
Yes.
So This is exactly like Kimmel, where a government action is taken, and then the economic gears are then put in motion to punish that person.
Yes.
And so this is untested area for the constitutional rights of freedom of speech. And before the end of the year, we're going to have a former head of the ACLU on to talk about free speech. We're going to do a lot on free speech because I think it is domestic policy that is clearly foreign policy, because if our free speech goes, what else we got? I mean, due process and free speech, that's kind of what separates us from everybody else.
Yes, exactly. I mean, how soon do we start going down the slippery slope the same way we were just talking about in Iran, where anybody who dared to speak out against the government, even during a 12-day war, are now literally, like I said before, on the chopping block. But this article that I found comes to us from our friends over at State Line, a part of the State's Newsroom, nonprofit journalism. And they say that this purge is driven in part by Republican elected officials. And it's not just Indiana, it's Texas, it's Oklahoma, it's South Carolina, who are encouraging Americans to report coworkers, their children's teachers, especially academia, government jobs. You are not safe from these people and their purge, but they have been egged on by the Trump administration with, and here's where our boy gets involved, Vice President J.D. Vance literally urging listeners of Kirk's multi-million listener podcast to call the employers of anyone, quote unquote, celebrating his killing. Obviously, Seena, like you're pointing out, this has now expanded into not just celebrating or posting gleefully about it, which even we admonished on our YouTube only special of people on the left doing, but it's literally like not honoring him right, not honoring a moment of silence, not having your flag at your school half-mast when it was ordered to be done so. So this is really, it's even more than just chilling free speech. It's like, if you're not honoring someone correctly, the government can literally come after you.
Wow. Well, we're here. This is...
Yeah, J.D. Vance hasn't come for us yet. And I say yet with a big capital Y-E-T.
Because we are apparently a terrorist group, because we are Antifa.
Oh, Antifa. You know what?
Anti-fascist. That's us. We're against fascism. So we are apparently in trouble.
Yes, we are a growing national movement network and completely organized. Sure. Anyway, moving on.
That'd be really funny. The last podcast network.
We're driving the surge and the purge all at the same time.
We're all very organized when we get barbecue. All right, let's go. What's next?
So that's the free speech portion of the J.D. Vance corner. Again, like that article pointed out, J.D. Vance spawned all of that because of what he literally said in the clip we played from Charlie Kirk's podcast when J.D. Vance co-hosted it. But it continues because there's more that the government can do against your enemies, foreign and domestic, Seena. That's right. Vance said, according to The Hill, that there will be more indictments after James Comey, who, as of this recording, has been officially indicted by the Department of Justice. And, of course, that was not the case a week ago when we recorded. That news dropped over the Thursday, Friday. Over the weekend, of course, Comey's going to fight the charges. But Vice President Vance said on Sunday on one of the morning talk shows that more indictments are coming under the Trump administration. Again, he is just showing his MAGA credentials. And obviously, James Comey has been a target on Trump's list for a long time. But the fact that J.D. Vance is warning that there will be more is certainly, I would think, not just chilling free speech, but this means anybody who can be seen as, quote unquote, an enemy of the Trump administration, whether it's the first one or the second one, like James Comey, is not safe from lawfare, which, again, is literally what Trump has been railing against as something that happened to him. Now he's doing it against his enemies. And Seena, you're a lawyer. You know, I've heard from my analysis that the charges against James Comey are very flimsy, and the federal jury didn't even go with another charge that they had. They only went with 2 charges against him. What do you think?
Yeah, this is probably going to get dismissed in some form, but you know what? This is just to quell speech. This is to create fear. This is to make life difficult for James Comey. This is to go after their enemies. One thing I was talking about with a friend the other day is that Trump's been sued so many times, he really understands the judicial process and how it works. And he knows that once you start getting sued or once you start getting charges brought against you, you have to go through a process which takes time, money, effort, and it's a real pain. And it doesn't cost him anything money. It's the American taxpayers that are having to do this kind of stuff. And then people in that grand jury, and you know, this is the thing that's such a problem, is that there are norms that we used to have that people followed that weren't that kept us from doing things like this. But when these are norms that you can't codify, really. You can't put them into laws. Like, you don't just go after your political enemies with accusations and charges like this. Those are things that it's like hard to make a law for something like that because it's so nebulous. This is where we're at, and it really shows how vulnerable our democracy is at the end of the day.
Yeah, something that you've always said that I really admire about our judicial system is that it's not the plumbing, it's the plumbers.
Yeah.
The plumbing is actually set up to work as long as the plumbers don't completely clog it up and ruin the toilet for everybody. Speaking of toilets, J.D. Vance, this is what he said on Fox News Sunday. There's certainly going to be more indictments coming over the next 3.5 years of the Trump administration. Keep in mind, Seena, and you just pointed it out again about the plumbers, there was another U.S. attorney who could have brought these charges in Virginia, but refused, so had to resign. And then he was replaced by a Trump lackey. So Vance, according to, again, a guy who has a law degree from Yale, supposedly, said that the administration will always let the law drive the investigations, quote unquote, and added, like you said, Comey will, quote unquote, have his day in court to prove his innocence. But like you said, the lawfare already makes it so expensive for him to do that. Yeah. Well, anyway, don't worry. JD gets even worse. In this final part of everyone's favorite weekly segment, J.D. Vance said, I mean, do you just want to play this clip?
Yeah,
he's talking about law enforcement, because I just want to point out real quick before this clip that we just talked about a guy who was in law enforcement, James Comey, head of the FBI. He was doing law enforcement, and then he was fired. And now the law enforcement is coming after him. And here's J.D. Vance saying more things about law enforcement.
Because here's what happens when Democrats like Gavin Newsom did say that these people are part of an authoritarian government. When the left-wing media lies about what they're doing, when they lie about who they're arresting, when they lie about the actual job of law enforcement, what they're doing is encouraging crazy people to go and commit violence. You don't have to agree with my immigration policies. You don't have to agree with Donald Trump's immigration policies. But if your political rhetoric encourages violence against our law enforcement, you can go straight to hell, and you have no place in the political conversation of the United States of America.
Oh, you go straight to hell, Seena.
I'm glad he's not saying anything that's encouraging violence.
Right, he's not saying anything incendiary.
No,
by the way, the
nothing
only
there.
way for you to go to hell is to die and be a bad person, supposedly. So the gaslighting. This is what every week I just hate him even more and more and more.
Yeah.
And yes, I know he's from my home state, and yes, I know we share a birthday. But I have had it because this gets worse and worse. The gaslighting of saying the left and the lying media, and he goes on in that clip to, by the way, blame NBC News and the fake news of mischaracterizing their comments, even though you can just listen to the comments as is, and you can hear blatantly what you just heard. Blaming the left for causing political violence, and then simultaneously potentially causing political violence with his own comments, blaming everything on the left. And you can
it's incredible. All these
straight to
masked
hell.
ICE officials, these brown shirts that are going across to every country. Of course, violence spikes when they show up and start snatching people up, unless you're in Chicago and they try to get that delivery guy who got away very quickly.
Oh,
Did you
man,
see that video?
I sure did see that video.
Incredible.
They can't get him now. He's on a bike. What do we do?
Yeah, what do we do? Oh,
Well,
I'm so out of shape.
That's a good lesson for everyone else who's got to run from ICE. Get a bike.
Get
It's
a
good for you.
bike. All right. Travis, Irvine, thank you so much. Here's one thing that the listeners should know coming up on a YouTube-only edition. Everyone's most hated secretary, Pete Hegseth, did a 71-minute speech. We're going to do a full breakdown on our YouTube page. YouTube only. Because
Right. And by full breakdown, you mean we're going to break down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's... When the news is terrible, we're trying to make it bearable.
But sometimes we just won't. And I'll tell you what, I respect this feed. I respect this feed so much that I'm not putting it in the feed. We're going to put it on the YouTube page because this is a precious feed. And I don't want to do anything crazy, and I don't want to cry or scream as much as I probably will when we do this Hegseth breakdown. So thanks for being on the show, foreignreportshow.com. theforeignreportlpn@gmail.com. Rate us, put us, subscribe, all that jazz, and then check out our YouTube page for this Hegseth only breakdown.